Welcome to I Am Goddess Collective podcast, a sacred space for empowerment through modern magic, spiritual activism, and reclaiming your power. I am your host, Nixie Marie, feng shui practitioner, earth activist, and mystic, here to support and inspire your journey in becoming the change you wish to see in this world. That change starts within. Join myself and fellow thought leaders, metaphysical experts, and luminaries each week as we explore practical and magical ways to living in your highest alignment. Your journey as an empowered goddess begins here. Let's dive in. Hello, sacred sisters. Welcome back to I Am Goddess Collective podcast, a sacred space for female empowerment and all things mystical. I feel like this podcast is a blend of like an alchemic blend between the spirit world and this physical planet that we live on and how we navigate it every single day and how we become one with our own infrastructure of navigating this modern world and really inviting you back to your inner magic. So this week on the show, we have Aarona Lea. She is the co-creator of the Moon Deck. It is this oracle deck that invites you back to your intuition and really invites you to connect to your divine feminine inner goddess. So this week we are diving into a conversation around ancestral healing, death and rebirth, and honoring our ancestors, and really taking a moment to value and appreciate those who have woven these stories of amazing, skills and strengths and storytelling abilities of who we really are as a goddess, as well as just a beautiful human being on this planet. So it being Samhain season, and this is the last episode of my favorite month of the year, which I'm actually quite sad about. I feel like I could go on with October for pretty much the entire year. If you feel the same way, just know you're not alone. The witch's month is really the best time of the year, because it's like finally a time where we really get honored and recognized. And however, I will say, I'm going to backtrack there for a minute. We're really getting honored and recognized right now, you guys. I have seen countless articles on New York Times and books being published, and so much information being delivered to our communities, to the world, that we are alive and we are here once again, and we are here to shine our light and really show who we are without the fear, like the witch, who she is really, not the one that's like, let me give you this apple and I am evil, like, while that part of us, the shadow part of us that we're so willing to look at as a practitioner of this magic, that's not necessarily who we are, right? It's actually very much a part of our journey, though, is to look at the shadow, look at the evil sides of humanity. And not everybody's willing to look at that. So if you've been doing that deep work, sister, take a moment and acknowledge yourself, hold yourself, tell yourself, I'm doing the work. I'm showing up. I'm healing my ancestral lineage. I'm uncomfortable with my current reality because I know I'm shifting. I know I'm calling in a bigger life. I know I'm living my highest alignment of myself. Even if you don't feel like that right now, trust that you're moving in that direction. Like, times are real right now. Shit is happening. So don't forget it. Don't forget where we are. The fact that this podcast can even be a thing, the fact that so many podcasts are a thing is incredible, because we were burned at the stakes, you guys. Like, and guess what? We're not burning anymore. Like, we have risen from the ashes like the phoenix rises, and we are here once again to speak our truth and to rise up and honor our ancestors and say thank you. Thank you for this medicine that you have brought to me and told for me. Thank you for your ability to set this foundation up for me to rise up for you. You guys, the work that we do, the healing work that we do, the crying, the tears, the you name it, the psychosis, the crazy, whatever they want to call us, we're doing that for 7 generations behind us and 7 generations ahead of us. Breathe that in. The work you're doing is not just for you. The work you're doing is for the collective. It's for your family. It's for your children's children. It's for the future of humanity. Breathe that in. Take a moment to recognize the power that you are. The power that you bring to this planet. Take a moment to breathe it all in. And as you breathe all that in, and you soak in your own auric field of magic, hold yourself and honor yourself for all that you are. And as you hold yourself, and as you bring yourself to this space of deep inner intimacy and devotion with who you are and why you're here, just bring joy to it. Bring gratitude to it. Be in grace. Be in possibility. Be in love. And be at peace. Are you guys ready to dive into this podcast? This episode where we get super deep with my soul sister about the things that we don't often talk about. Death. Those who have passed beyond the veil. And really a little bit about why these veils are so thin right now and how you can really communicate with your ancestors to do this deep work around clearing up all those stories that you don't want to carry anymore. Those burdens, those painful experiences. Sometimes that shit ain't yours, sister. Sometimes you gotta drop that bag off at the train station and say, bye-bye. Bye, Felicia. That story ain't mine no more. So if that's what you feel right now and you're tuning into that and you're saying, yes, I'm complete, I'm done with this story, this podcast episode's about to take you right there. So, Aarona Lea, you guys, let's give it up for this soul sister who's created so much magic for women, so much healing for all of our collective. Such an honor to have her on the show and to have her in my life as a sister. She's truly a magical being, and I can't wait for you guys to meet her. Give it up for the lovely Aarona Lea. Here we go. Hello, sacred sisters. Welcome back to I Am Goddess Collective podcast. I'm very honored today because I'm interviewing a fellow soul sister and I get to look at her face, which is very rare. So she lives in this beautiful Venice studio and I'm here in her studio and we've got Aarona Lea. How are you, darling?
Hi, Nixie. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
Happy to have you here. Yeah, I'm excited. So Arana is actually the founder and co-creator of the Moon Deck. And she is also an emotional health advocate, author, and business owner, intuitive oracle reader. And with that, Arana really helps and supports others demystify intuition, ritual, self-love, and personal growth. She has developed an intuitive oracle deck of cards called the Moon Deck, as I said, which has really reached thousands of women globally and has set forth a movement of affirmation and ritual. Arana started her own healing journey as a child, and this curiosity led her on a lifelong path of study, practice, and ritual, where she explored the shadowy depths of healing trauma, recovered from bulimia and chronic binge cleanse cycles, and is now helping and supporting to normalize conversations around emotional health and intuition. So it's no surprise as to why she's on the show with us today. So thank you so much for gracing us with your presence.
Thank you. Yeah.
So we sort of read here in your information about you, like your story and how you got started. You know, you're the co-creator of this Moon Deck, which I absolutely love. And we have here for you guys. We'll probably pull a card at some point. But, you know, tell me your journey. How did you get here? What inspired you to create this deck? And just get into the story. I love talking about story because I think it's such a gift to hear about, you know, what led you here, and everybody gets to understand a little bit more about you.
Thank you. Yeah. So it's definitely been a work in progress, and it feels like more will come out of it. And I'm sure, as you know, and some of your listeners know, it's like one thing leads to the next. So it doesn't feel like it ends here by any means, but it is a culmination of years and years of work, both as a teacher and as a student. And I would say that so much of the Moon Deck has been pulled from all of my life, even though as a yoga teacher for 15 years and being a practitioner for 25 years, that sort of studentship and then being a teacher and leading people has been filtered into it in a big way. But before all of that, even, I was definitely a little tween witch. And
I can totally see that.
Yeah, I was really I just was so curious. And even as a child, I had a natural pull towards spirituality. My mom was pretty mystical and spiritual, but she also really struggled with anchoring it and was bipolar and an addict and really struggled emotionally. And so as a young age, being an empathic and sensitive child, I think I also learned kind of that shadowy depth that you mentioned at a very young age. My parents split when I was 4, and I was mostly raised by my dad, and he's far more, kind of anchored in that way, but also really intense. So I go all the way back to childhood because so much of this started then, and there was a fair amount of chaos and uncertainty growing up. When my parents themselves had a pretty not graceful divorce and sometimes violent, and then my mom kind of continued in some domestic violent relationships after that I saw, and then there was the alcohol and all these things. But again, she was out of all my family. My stepmom came into my life at a young age. So I had all these figures that were sort of intense in various ways. But when I would visit my mom, I would have to experience that sort of all over again. And then I'd go back to my dad and things would be sort of structured again. But it was interesting because my mom, even though there was that chaos there and that sort of, it was difficult because I never knew quite how to help her. And would be in the middle of it sometimes. But then at the same time, she was the one who really sort of celebrated and inspired my belief in magic and mysticism. And, I could talk openly about it with her. I had wild experiences when I was young. I could tell her anything. She taught me how to cast a bubble of light around me at a very young age. So, there was the chaos there, but this understanding of who I was on a soul level, my native roots, my Native American roots come also from her. And then my dad, I had this structure and, kind of like shaping my ideas around, work and security and these things. But then my spirituality and how I saw the world was often dismissed, or my sensitivity was often dismissed. So then I kind of felt like I didn't have a place to express that sensitivity. I kind of had to hide it because I was told I was too sensitive frequently, or that I can't feel my way through things, that that's not how you do it. And so it was confusing. And I think as a result of that, found my own ways to express myself. And when I wasn't feeling safe, I would feel energy a lot. I would make up my own languages and pray and, just had my own little spirit guides. I would learn how to talk to God. I would visit friends' houses who did their thing I was so curious what everyone did. And I was exposed to a lot of religion growing up because my dad is Jewish and my mom was raised Jehovah but became Buddhist, but we'd celebrate Christmas. So
wow, there's a lot of mixture there.
There's a lot of mixture growing. So I think all of that came together into a place where you mentioned the bulimia in my bio. It was a 10-year journey. And that was about 20 years ago now. And I think that was just a accumulation of rage and anger and control. Like everything around me felt so out of control. So as a child, I learned how to control this little environment around me. And that's for me how it manifested.
Wow.
And so again, that also deepened my spirituality. I just fell to my knees one night, like in very, very deep, sincere prayer for help because I was really trying
I just got chills.
Yeah, it was intense. I know I was trying to do it. It would sway. It wasn't. When I started to get help, I went to 12-step and I heard other stories. I was just like, oh God, like okay, there were some really bad ones. So not that it was a comparison, but it helped me feel understood and feel like I wasn't talking with 10 heads and it kind of cracked my heart open, but also to hear that there were, worse stories and that I could support them and I felt supported. So yeah, I think the pendulum swung a lot. I would, that got mixed with my deep desire to also be very healthy. I learned about organic living when I was about 17 and got really passionate about it. So it all got murky because this holistic desire was mixed with this eating disorder.
Yeah.
And all of that, I think any addiction, whether it's a substance or a behavior or relationships or sex or whatever it is really just a strange accumulation of habits and rituals. And I think I kind of realized that at a point where like, these are just weird rituals that I'm sort of locked into, these patterns.
Right.
And there's a strange comfort in that. But then there's all this pain that results eventually, and little by little, I just started to add in healthy things and being less concerned about forcefully stopping anything.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a big turning point for me. And then I was 19 is when I started to do yoga. And when I found it, which was through my older brother at the time, it was the first time where I really got like into my body again. I had been escaping it for so long and judging it and criticizing it and kind of taking those external voices when I was growing up and just pushing them onto myself.
Yeah.
So that was a big point as well where I was like, wow, I'm in my body. I'm in my breath. I'm more grounded. I actually have the power to choose something different. And so I got really heavy into that. And I could go on, but it's just like all these things started to add up combined with the mysticism that was inherently in me already.
Yeah.
Was it natural and just in me? Was it born out of the trauma? It doesn't really matter. I think when we're young, we find all kinds of ways to cope and use our imagination. And I believe that those are all portals to some of the deeper magic that's available to us. And then eventually I did holistic health counseling. I went to school for art and photography, eventually became a yoga teacher, did a lot of traveling. And the Moon Deck, now that we're at the answer of your question, is a culmination of all of that, of traveling around the world and learning about culture and prayer and their ways of doing things. And I already had that curiosity in me, healing from trauma and knowing what it takes to show up for ourselves. And that healing is a collaborative process with spirit. And then the practices of therapy and yoga and meditation and knowing when to ask for help and when to go inward to work with that help. And the Moon Deck, I think, speaks to all of these parts of me. Like it's kind of the voice that young girl needed of deep validation, really deep validation, and learning to no longer doubt myself and really trust myself and trust my intuition. And that's still a work in progress, but it's come a long, long way. And I know when I see women work with the Moon Deck or work with me, that I'm speaking to that part of them. And this tenderness just opens up because so many of us want to feel heard and seen and validated. And a lot of us didn't have that. And it wasn't anyone's fault. There's others didn't have the tools to know how to manage that. I think that's thankfully changing, at least in our circles of how we see people parenting and things like that. But I just think there wasn't a language for it. And now there is, and we're helping to develop that. And the Moon Deck really is a deck that inspires you coming back home to yourself, amplifies and wakes up your intuition, cultivates a sense of self-love, and ritualizes emotional and mental health, and helps us be brave and not be ashamed of our connection to spirit and spirituality.
Wow, so good. Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
I can hear a lot of stories of my own in there too, and I'm sure a lot of listeners can, just hearing the dichotomy and this polarity between like the like medicine woman and this like rigid polarity of like the man that wants to have this analytical, realistic approach to life. And that's just like not the structures that we are in and some of our mothers were in even, and I think that there's just like that storyline with those two archetypes are very much rooted in a lot of our programming. And I think that's why, these opportunities with tools like your Moon Deck and the meditation and yoga are bringing us back to this awareness where we can have this sense of like who we are and recognize that we don't have to carry on those stories from them. You know?
And not carry them forward, but also honoring the ancestral aspect of it and the lineage that we've been handed, that like it's actually, if we can shift our perspective, even if we've had a really rough time, just to pause for a moment. And I had a really beautiful experience recently where I just sort of paused in my footsteps. I think I was dancing and to kind of pause. And because when I dance, I get a lot of downloads, and I just was like, whoa, like it felt like this sudden awareness of this honor I've been given to clean up the lineage, to like what my grandmother and great grandmother and great great grandmother probably has carried, certainly what my mother carried, and that I've been handed this opportunity to work on myself, share it with others, and actually kind of have a far greater impact than I might realize, even though I'm doing all this like quote unquote self-work or self-development. And that it's hard to verbalize, but it was this like very visceral moment where I just suddenly felt into the privilege that I was given to do that, and the strength I was given to be able to do that. And whether my bloodline ends here or continues forward, that it's still having a ripple effect on the planet, and that like just trusting that plan, whatever it might look like, and getting out of the convention and out of the box of what we've been told things have to look like. Yeah.
I mean, we definitely are in this very sacred time, this portal right now where the veils are thinning. And for those listeners out there, we just really felt called to even bring that conversation in now is with the ancestors, with Samhain approaching, and really identify how our stories are woven through our bloodline. And I think it's just so fitting that you're here, and your deck really represents, the manifestation, I think, that of the healing that we all need to really navigate through all of those tough, traumas, the stories. And like you said, the work that you're doing, I feel like is so impactful because you're healing your generations as well, and the ones that come before you, because whatever stories that you have taken on up until now are no longer coming with you, and how like that shit is fucking powerful.
Yeah.
And your parents feel that, your mom feels that, your dad feels that, whether they can admit that or not, or understand the feeling, that to me is, the root of why a lot of us are here right now, I think.
And I think giving ourselves permission to own that. Like no one else is going to give us that permission. No one else is going to give us the validation. It's time to not seek that externally, and really start to cultivate that internally. And we do get to a place where it all makes sense. And my mom actually passed away 2.5 years ago. And this was like not her planet, I always say. So I feel like she is much happier. And, but I work with her spirit all the time. And when I moved, I was in New York for 18 years. And as you know, I kind of went through a divorce, and my mom passed away kind of all in the same few months. And then I came to LA, which is where I'm originally from, just to kind of make a change. I didn't know whether or not I would stay here. I have a lot of family here. And so as soon as I came here, I had to stop in Colorado to handle her affairs, and I just wanted to honor her right. And we cleared out her house. And I'll tell this story because we're talking about ancestors, so that maybe this will be inspiring, but she wanted to be cremated. And my brother's like, okay, we're going to, pick up mom on Thursday. And I'm like, we're not picking up mom on Thursday. I'm like, the guy's just going to business as usual. I think that didn't feel good. So I was like, we have to go see her or honor her in some way. It just
When did she pass?
2.5 years ago. And so he was like, okay, we'll call them. So they don't get that request a lot, I guess.
Yeah.
People just go and get the ashes. And so, you know, they said fine eventually. And, you know, I had to pay, like, it wasn't a lot, like a couple $100 just to like get her, I guess they had to do her makeup and whatever they do. And so I just got this massive bag of white sage, a bundle of wildflowers, and I brought a moon deck. Yeah, and it was me, her. I have a little brother and sister that come from my dad and stepmom, and she's been in my life since I was 6, so we're all pretty tight. But they are sort of like a pod, and then me and my brother and my mom have this really deep karma together. So it was me and him there, my older brother Sean, who's been a great friend and teacher to me in a lot of ways, because we're cut from the same cloth, and we just like get each other.
Yeah.
We have the same, you know, neuroses, so that we've been healing and working on, you know, big time, and have come a long way. So we went there, and my brother went and checked her out first because he's my big brother. He's like, let me make sure the coast is clear. I know. And he stood there. He's like, all right, Arana, come over. And I went, and I was just, wow, like my eyes just locked in, and she was in this kind of white box with the sheet and just her hands and her face. And to me, I mean, death is, in this culture, we don't really talk about it very much. I think there's a lot of fear around it. You know, it's quite a sacred passage in a lot of ways, right? And so we went there, and I just like, I hadn't seen her in a year, and it was so interesting and fascinating and beautiful to see her. And I just sprinkled the sage all around her, put the flowers there. They did such a good job. They had put red roses on her already. And then I sprinkled the cards of the moon deck around her because she's really in that deck.
Blasted with chills right now.
Yeah. I was like, I want to take a photo. I was like, do not take a photo, Arana. You know, just like let this be.
Yeah.
Just because it was so beautiful, but it was just
some
for
things
us
are
in
meant
that
to stay sacred.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I did that, and I just felt her spirit there, just to honor her in the right way, especially because we do have some Native American blood, and to bring that sage in and to be there just with me, her, and my brother. It just was like such a precious moment. And then just this image, I'll never forget it, with the sage and the flowers. And I just felt her spirit so happy. And my brother had to pull me away because I was just so locked into it. I probably could have stood there forever.
Wow.
And then, and then we, you know, did a little crying and just took it all in and did some praying and stood there together. And the guys who were working there were in the back, like just shedding tears. Like they just like hadn't seen this before, really.
Wow.
And then, I
just
mean,
like a ritual around like what you guys are creating energetically.
Exactly. And they were like, what was that? It smelled so good. It was the sage. And then we left because I guess it's not, you don't, I thought we were going to stay for, I've been to India where you like see the bodies go into the fire.
Yeah, wow.
So that's not what this was. I actually thought it would be, but it wasn't. And, which is fine. Probably maybe better. I don't know.
Yeah. They do like, I've heard of Celtic burials too, where they actually cremate while you send them out on the water. You can see it's like
beautiful.
A really, really mythical experience, apparently. So
I've seen it in India where they, at the burning ghats in Haridwar, they have one main fire that's up higher and it can never go out. And then they have 3 lower fires that the bodies go into. And there was this moment, this was in 2001, where I happened to come upon it when I saw the 3 cycles. So one body had been burning and the bones were illuminating out of the fire. One body had just been put in, and you just sort of saw they're covered in fabric. And then the third one just got put in. I saw like all these cycles. And again, I was like kind of just engrossed in it. It's like uncomfortable, but it was also beautiful and curious and just something I hadn't seen. And so I think that experience actually so many years ago kind of equipped me for this moment with my mom, because it was the right thing to do. It doesn't matter if it's hard or not. It was the right thing to do for a loved one. And it's okay to make it about the person who's moving on and not about ourselves. So that was that. And then we, a couple days later, picked her ashes up and then did the whole ceremony, and family came. And that was interesting too, because her family who came were Jehovah, and we're in the front like chanting Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, because we did like a Buddhist honoring of her at the man's house who had introduced her to Buddhism, and there's like so many different things there. And I gave like the
I'm
opening
surprised
speech.
that Jehovah's actually came, because I've heard so many. My sister is a Jehovah.
Yeah, I think just in honor of my mom. But
That's
what was
amazing.
beautiful, I did like an opening, and I was like, this is perfect. This is so my mom. Like she was so eccentric and eclectic, and so we did that, and my brother and I shared. We did the Buddhist chanting. They didn't chant with us. They just sort of stood there with,
fascination.
I think they were kind of
and freaked outness, like those witches over there. They're worshiping the devil or something. I don't know what they think.
Actually, at the time though, I was proud of them. They really seemed receptive. And then my uncle,
I think they're more receptive than they give themselves credit for.
And they knew my mom. She was a black sheep, or a rainbow sheep, as my friend Roxy calls it. And then my uncle opened up the Bible and read from a Jehovah page, and he chose the most beautiful excerpt about a bird. And so it was actually like so beautiful. And then when I moved to LA, she came to me as a hummingbird. So now my mom is a hummingbird in my life. And just now whenever I see one, I think of her, but there was such like pristine, precise moments when the bird would come up, the hummingbird, when I really needed it, because I would be so heavy and I was going through a lot with the divorce and this, and I was pretty heavy when I got here. So the hummingbird kept coming in to help lighten me up and remind me that she's there. And so now I work with her spirit. She stands on my left side.
Oh, wow.
And so it's important to honor them, I think. And it's like, the birth and death are these, sacred gateways with all these breaths in between. And
I like what you said, in a couple sentences ago about death not being something we really talk about. But I think I haven't had a lot of really intense death, like with families. I've had my grandfather pass, which really I've been working with him now more in the spirit realm, where I definitely kind of forgot about him for a long time until I really started diving into Samhain and really working with my ancestors. And he like brought this really intense message, but it was like, oh, there you are. And I think that that's where this time, where the veils become so thin, is so important to really just sit down with yourself and like receive these messages that they want to tell you. And it might come in like a whatever clair you are, I see more visual, and sometimes it's through this voice, but most of the time it's like a vision, but with death, like, were you always like close to death? Like you seem to have a very like infatuation sort of with this experience of seeing this like overall, cycle. And I think that being a witch and like along this craft, it's really a part of our craft, to honor the dead cycles. So like,
I have probably mixed. I haven't, my grandmother passed away many, many years ago. I had a wild experience in a meditation where I think she was sick, so I knew she was on her way out, but I was in a meditation, and in my meditation, I was just like flowing with I was just thinking it was my imagination in the moment, but my grandma rather, in this visual during this meditation, entered this sort of white liminal room with me and was having a hard time letting go. And I was like helping her breathe. And I didn't know if this was a real vision or not, but after that meditation where she kind of came to me for support to let go and move on, I had a message from my dad that she had died like within that morning, or maybe it was that night. When I don't know exactly when it was, but it was within that time frame. Wow. So there's been moments like that, and then my mom and the experience I shared about her. But I haven't, fortunately, I know some people have had like really traumatic experiences with death, where so many people they love die, and so I haven't had. It's all been, I've lost people, and it's difficult. But knock on wood, it hasn't been this just like crazy amount or traumatic, scary, it hasn't been that. And I know people where they've had an unusual thread of death show up in their life. So I don't know if it was on that level, how I would feel about it. I just know based on what I have experienced, which has been more natural, or, spread out at least. And, so it's hard to say what that is. I think in some ways I definitely have this fascination, like the India, thing that I mentioned in my mom, and sort of just energetically feeling locked in versus repulsed. Like I'm kind of, I see the beauty in it. So that's very natural for me. But I also fear it a little bit. I think I fear like sickness more than death. And I think I fear it, but at my core, I trust the whole thing. When I think of losing my father, I definitely feel like that's
not ready for that one.
No, not ready for that one at all. Like as much as we have our stuff to work out, or I think it's both. I think that like when it comes, push to shove, and I need to show up, I'm going to show up, and I'm going to do what's needed in a ceremonial and honorable way, and understand on a deeper soul level that this is a part of the journey. That's for sure in me. But will the very human part of me fall apart sometimes or be scared? Sure.
Yeah. What is your like perspective on death?
Like what happens after? My perspective, of course, I don't think any of us have the answers at all, no matter how well versed in it we may be. But I believe that life certainly didn't start here or end here. I do think something came before this. I do feel like we're going to be going somewhere afterwards. Does that look like reincarnation in human form? I'm not sure about that. Maybe this is like Earth as a school and then we move on to the next school.
Yeah.
I do feel like at our very center, this in yoga, this is like the Sushumna Nadi. I'm sure there's a lot of terms in it. But I feel like there is a central, I see the soul as a cord, like almost like a golden rope or cord that runs through our center. And that cord is with us through all the lives. But in different lives, other cords mingle with that cord and get sort of wrapped around it. And some of those cords are good and some of them not. And I say that because when I was going through my divorce and I was still living at the house and like really literally crumbling and falling apart, like my foundation got so rocked from that, both because I was, losing something and saying goodbye to something that I thought was a forever and all the things that is about. And that's kind of a different conversation, but also releasing a whole story that I thought I was building, but it was also even further back than that. It brought up so much stuff from childhood. It was just this unleashing, like Pandora's box just freaking opened and everything came out, everything. And I mean, I think everything, there's probably more layers there actually until the next layer is revealed, I'm sure. But in that moment, I saw that cord metaphor because the foundation got so rocked and these roots got uprooted, like that they meaning these other cords didn't even expect it, right? Just like boom, that I saw a pretty self-hating cord unravel, like a non-self-loving cord unravel. And I don't even think it expected, it's probably like sleeping or something. And it was like, boom, like everything got rocked. And it was pretty intense and it's hard to explain, but it was almost like I got to like pull myself back, like my whole chest and head was like, what? And like looked at it with a different perspective. And then I was sitting with Andy in the car, bawling my eyes out outside of my place. And she's the illustrator of the Moon Deck and my business partner. And she's such an angel. She was like, love and lighting me with her words and like trying to like lift me up. And I saw that voice again. It was after I had that experience. And
this is when you guys split up, like you had.
But I was still living at the house. I was literally like on the floor crying, and I saw this separation happen within myself. And I don't think I had words for it at the time, but I just felt it and I saw it. And then the time I was sitting with Andy in the car was after that, and I had told her about it because she understands that language and then she was like love and lighting me, just trying to like, get me back to center and who I am. And I was like, there's that voice. It's trying to deflect everything you say. I saw it like trying to like just push what she was saying away and keep it away from me in a way. And whether that is a protective voice that I gave birth to at a young age or some kind of other thing that is passed from my mom, I don't know. And I don't even know how important it is to dissect it. But I just saw that it was there and I recognized that it's not actually my voice and that it's something else that is, I don't know. I don't know if it's like an energy sucker or if was a protection that just got deranged as I got older, or like who knows, like if it was more of a psychological thing or a spiritual thing. But I do feel like when we have a lot of trauma, we sort of vacate. And if we're not in our body, something else wants to occupy it, whether that is a certain mindset and we want to keep it more psychological, or it's parasites, or it's energetics, or it's some kind of darker force. I don't know what to call it, but I do think that can happen. And that's why this validation piece is so important for us, because it brings us back home to our body so that we're occupying it. This is our home and we can claim that sovereign nature over our body and over our home. I mean, I even in my home often, take some type of smudge or sage and I go through all the doorways and all the windows and I claim my space. And I'm sure you do stuff like that too. And kind of the same thing with our body. And not
to cleanse and purify all of our environments, the inner and the outer. Yeah,
exactly. And not dismissing that because it's weird or because we were told it's not true. And I share that because I had that experience. And a lot of us have, and it's not anyone's fault. Again, it's just for us to work it out. But as we work it out, that's where this like amazing, resilient strength comes, where we really are confident in who we are and from a heart-centered place.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a crazy journey.
It's so crazy.
And it's a kind of, but really I know it was pretty crazy. And, you know, it didn't mean that like there wasn't still some like difficulties after that and struggles with like kind of wrestling with that voice when I would get into a low place. But I certainly had more understanding of it. And that understanding is, that wisdom is key to make the change.
Yeah. I'm really just feeling into this cord conversation and how I had the exact same experience with my ex.
Oh.
And I was actually looking in a mirror. I made the decision that I was going to leave while he was away training at this seminar. And I had to take that opportunity at the time because it was just the only time. Like there was a lot of manipulative energy. And if I didn't do it while he was away, then I probably would struggle getting out because there was always a conversation that would draw me back in. But to make it a long story short, I was looking in the mirror and just crying my eyes out. And I was like, I break all contracts that keep me binded to this story of being with a manipulative energy, being with this, or just not being able to stand in my own power and really take on my life. But, you know, being in fear, being in scarcity, like all these conversations that were keeping me in this mediocre life. And whatever happened in that little ceremony I did with myself was so powerful that I packed up all my shit, I left, and he called me that night and said, "What did you do?"
Whoa.
And
He wasn't even
like,
home?
Nope, he wasn't home. I was like, well, I remember there was actually fires going on that day. I was like, there was fires? I don't know what you're talking about. He's like, no, within us. What did you do? And I was like, you felt that? He's like, yeah, I felt it. And it blew. I still to this day, I'm like, what was that?
What did he feel?
I didn't quite dissect and ask, but he just knew that. I mean, he's very intuitive and definitely a wizard, but like I don't know. Wow. I'm sure he just felt like a dropping of something, a clearing. I mean, I don't really know. I should have asked him.
Well, yeah.
But what you're saying to the point of just death and having this cord and, you know, might have some truth in that. So I think death and all of this is very related because it is a death of a cycle. You know, it's closing, it's death and rebirth, being in this world of like the wheel of the year turning every single season. You know, there's seasons of death, and that's really where we are right now. And I think that's why there's so many fires burning. You know, we're having this conversation around all these stories that we've kind of put to rest.
Yeah.
So
it's interesting. And then I think it still was a cycle to kind of really release it. It's almost like, you know, it's like a callus, you know, it's like if you don't keep at it, it kind of grows back. But I think those like deeper habits, whether they're picked up from someone or in us from past lives or born in this life, to see them and not freak out and do what's needed to. And I think, you know, I'm sure all your listeners, it's just like, you know, I think we know in our bones, we know the truth for ourselves. I really believe that. Like, you know. And we just have to sometimes move some of the layers away so that we can trust it and listen a little deeper. And I think a sign that we're not connecting to that is when we're like asking everyone and their mom for advice. It's fine to ask people for help and advice. We need that reflection, especially as women. We need to kind of chirp away sometimes. But at some point, when do we just go in and ask ourselves what's needed? And that's something I did a lot, was like doubt myself and ask everyone else. And then they'd give me an answer, but I would flip it. I was like, but what about this? And I would just keep flipping it around and creating confusion for myself, you know? So I think untethering some of those cords and even just having the inquiry, if this is making sense, but you're not sure where to begin, just having the inquiry, like, how can I come back to my essential cord, my true center? How can I come back to my center of gravity, so that we can make decisions from that place and say yes or no in our life from that place?
Do you feel like some of that you've worked through was like your mom's story or your father's story, or
probably
be through that?
Yeah, a mix, I would say. My mom was more, you know, bless her heart, was more living as a victim. She did have a lot of pain. Like, she had a wild, intense life and didn't really have an outlet for it. And the addictions did not help. Alcohol, she eventually got addicted to pain pills, and she just had so much pain, and she was a brilliant writer, and she used to do stand-up comedy. She was like, had this contagious laugh. I actually heard her laughing at the funeral. I just saw her like sitting with people laughing, and I just felt her there so much. And, you know, but she just couldn't access it because of so much trauma, and she didn't have a community to kind of
support
her. And she didn't choose it, because she was in a lot of denial too, until her later years. I started to see a little bit of a change. And that's the thing. I think you can, you know, I just was like, even if my mom just gets 24 hours of like being awake to all of this and then leaves the planet, like that is something, because on a soul level, she's able to move on. You know, was it the best life? No, but I just really think it's on a soul level. And I know she saw that. So from her, there was a little bit of that victimhood. And I think I learned, you know, resentment and bitterness from her. And that's something I've had to work out. I also am learning a lot about human design, and know that that's something projectors can deal with. So it's interesting that I was kind of put into a family where that was a big theme for me. So learning how to dissolve resentment, really looking honestly at how it makes life not as beautiful, and can really eat at our self-worth, and therefore the relationships in our life. And so I think I kind of learned that from her. And have been working on that a lot in the last few years, particularly with everything I just shared. It's like I had to. I didn't have a choice in the matter. And then with my dad and my stepmom, they're intensely opinionated and judgmental. And they also have a little bit of that as well, to be honest. So I think that judgment that I felt from them a lot definitely started to build that voice of judgment and dismissing myself from them, mixed with my mom's kind of, you know, victim mentality, which just perpetuated unhealthy patterns. So now I feel like I'm on the other side of a lot of that. There's some final pieces to iron out, but I feel like the pieces I'm ironing out, it's just like the end of this long, deep journey. So it feels manageable, and it feels like I'm not in the dark about it anymore. And, you know, and it feels like I can now start to really work on my relationships in a way that's very current. And I think we just have to be aware of not getting lost in the past. And there's a difference between reliving the past over and over again, because we're stuck in a cycle of resentment, and we're now putting that even on new relationships. We're just seeing everyone through this filter of how past people hurt us. And so that needs to get cleaned up, so that this isn't polluting the present moment over and over again. So that's really the work that I've been doing with that. And, you know, but at the same time, the past, we don't want to get locked into the past, because if we're looping in our mind about a past experience, the emotional body doesn't know the difference. You're actually reliving it over and over and over and over again. The thought, that's how strong our thoughts are. So if we're stuck in the head and we have these blinders on and we're just like looping, we have to get out of that and notice it, even if it's just once a day, right? And then the next day it's 3 times a day, and we just build on it. Take a 360 view around you, realize where you actually are, which is in your home or on a hike, and how beautiful and safe that moment actually is, so that you pull yourself back to the present and not loop yourself into the past. Now, the difference of doing work on ourselves from past trauma is that as a result of perhaps traumas, and it doesn't matter if it was a little t or big T for someone, like trauma's trauma, that there is sometimes a byproduct from the past. So that's present. And there's a difference between looping and past thinking and repeating old patterns versus, okay, there's a byproduct of this past experience that in the present moment exists and needs to get tended to and cleaned up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of like the differentiation I've made, is like, I'm not in the past anymore, but I am cleaning up the byproduct of that. Right. And that requires love and validation and some work, and to show up even the littlest amount a day. That's why I say when people are like, I don't have time, like, you have 3 minutes a day. Show up 3 minutes every single morning or evening, whatever's your thing, and do your rituals, whether that's meditation or honoring your ancestors in this time that we're in, and working with your altar, picking a moon deck card, doing some journaling, dancing, because those 3 minutes, the cumulative impact of that 3 minutes over the course of 1 month is quite a lot of time, number one, and that has an effect on us mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And then number two, you're strengthening your ability to be in the practice of devotion to your well-being. And any good witch, as we know, or healer or teacher, you know, like tending to our own well-being is key. And so strengthening that muscle of devotion is really huge. Again, even if it's only 3 minutes a day. So you're reaping the benefits of those 3 minutes, the cumulative impact. You're strengthening your ability to be in a practice of devotion because you're showing up for yourself every day. No matter if you woke up on the right side of the bed or not, you still show up. It's a non-negotiable, for a period of time, for 30 days. I would recommend starting now. It's a really special time.
Yeah.
And that can look a lot of different ways. So I think having that daily practice is key in cleaning up the byproducts of past hurts.
Yeah. Well, my next question for you was going to be how, because I could hear our listeners just going, first of all, do your lights flicker often here?
They do.
Okay. I was like, maybe it's just right now. I always like to think that my house flickers all the time. But how do they get to that point? Because I know 1000% that there's so many of us who are working through like, how do we even discover or unravel the stories that our ancestors told or that our mothers told, or like, how do we even get there? What's great tools? And you kind of answered it there, but specifically like maybe by altar building, or like, what would you suggest? Like just by starting, other than this 3 minutes, like maybe someone that doesn't even have this in their home, like starting from scratch,
Right. Yeah. So whether or not you have an altar, I would say if you don't have one, you're starting from scratch. If you do have one, it might be time to freshen it up. It needs to be tended to and fed. So think of feeding your altar as feeding your spirit and your relationship to spirit and your ancestors. So if if it's been collecting dust, it's time to clean it up. If it's been, sitting with a specific intention for 6 months, it's probably time to flip that around.
Right.
So that's what I would say if you have one. If you don't have one, I would start, it can be really small, it can be really simple, or it can be really ornate. It's up to you. And I personally have had all kinds of altars all over in my travels and many homes. And I would get a small little table. It can even be like a little wooden stool. It can be a little chest, something like that. I like that. Some people even have it on a desk or a windowsill, but I like to sit low to the ground when I work with my altar. So a chest of some kind, a stool, something that's just even a tray, something where it's a little elevated. And then use your intuition, trust your intuition. Let this be a place where you're not like checking off the boxes of what's right and wrong. Like really tune in and pause and get creative.
Yeah.
I love to have a candle in the center. Sometimes you might have a candle for all the directions. If you're really working with the water element right now, maybe you have a small vessel of water and another vessel of earth on your altar. I think it's really about what are you feeling most called to? And again, coming back to this validation piece, just validate it and go with it.
Yeah.
Because it's like strengthening the muscle or learning the dialect and language of your intuition and what inspires you, and starting to become an interpreter of that language in a way that is your own. Of course, we can read books and go to teachers and follow certain people for inspiration and ideas and a roadmap to emulate. And that's great. But ultimately it comes back to you. So, but for inspiration, I have a candle in the center. I work with a lot of stones and crystals, so I'll have those around. Sometimes I'll have, a certain written intention folded under my candle. Yeah. It's always changing based on what's going on. And for the time of our ancestors, I would suggest freshening it up in honor of them. And maybe you add some photos of yourself as a young girl and your mother and your great grandmothers. And maybe you even have photos that isn't your bloodline, but that you feel really, really connected to these ancestors in some way. And you put them on your altar. And then I would also say to give an offering of some kind, maybe making a plate of food that you feel like, if you do have an ancestor who has passed away, like my mom, I would make something for her versus my great-great-great-grandmother. Maybe make a plate of food or even a bowl of figs, or like what was native to the ancestors that you're connecting with when they're like in their most native land. And thinking about that, doing a little research, even that digging and research will wake that up. And then cook the food for them or prepare the food for them. And as you're preparing the food, really connecting to what you're doing. And that action alone, and then putting it on your altar, is so amazing. And then you can have it on your altar for 24 hours. And somehow I find when I do that, it doesn't like rot. It's the weirdest thing. It just sort of stays. And then you don't, it's magic. And then you don't eat it afterwards. You get rid of it. You can either bury it in the earth or throw it away outside of your home. And just know that you did feed someone. You're not wasting it. That you can,
Yeah, I like putting it into the earth, like giving it back to the nutrients and the soil. That sounds fitting because it's like they're passed on, and you kind of recreate that alchemy by putting it into the ground.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And it could even be, you know, it could be so many things. It can be like burning smudge and things like that. So I've recently become friends with and work sometimes with a woman called Liv Wheeler from the Candomblé. And she's amazing.
You've told me about her though, actually. Now I remember the Candomblé. There's like a language.
She's literally channeling like these ancient ancestors. Wow. They're the little people. And so she teaches a lot about this. And it's something I've worked with on my own, but she's really rekindled that for me. And when she has a retreat, everyone has to prepare food and bring it to the altar. So you just see all kinds of foods from every type of ancestry on the altar. It's so beautiful. And the Candomblé like love honey and sweet things. So then you're just having these like gobs of honey and like a bucket basically when she's doing the channeling. So she's rekindled that for me. And I go through phases of doing it, but I think with the holiday right now and the veils being thin, that if this resonates, you know, again, it can be simple, it can be ornate, it's up to you, you know, and just create something that feels true to your heart. The building of the altar might be enough for some of you, the honoring of the elements, or creating food of some kind. That's like just saying thank you, because think of all of the, like literally for us to be here right now, like if we trace back to our great grandparents, like all of these connections had to happen, seed, and like manifest over and over and over and over and over again for us to actually be here right now. Yeah. It's kind of a miracle. And just like a way to say thank you to that lineage and to start helping to clean up the pieces of the lineage that perhaps they didn't have the opportunity to clean up. And you know, in the Moon Deck that we have an ancestors card, and the ritual is, each card has a ritual, and the ritual for that is this little contract that you write and sign. Aww. It's called the Beacon of Light contract. And it's really about, you know, about no longer carrying forward the resentments, the baggage, the judgments, the behaviors, whatever it is that you just know aren't serving yourself or humankind, that like it stops here. And then what you're also signing over to on that contract is that, and at the same time as you no longer will bring that forward, the legacy you will bring forward are the jewels and the gems and the treasures that you've been handed from your the legacy of your ancestors, and that these are the legacies you'll leave behind. So it's just a way to say like, okay, I'm doing some cleanup work. Like they went through that, and I'm strong enough and connected enough to clean some of that up to the best of my ability for myself and for humankind, and as a thank you, and for the earth. And then I also need to acknowledge that there's also great, even if you had a painful lineage, there's also treasures there. There's also deep wisdom there. Yeah. Maybe even more so if you've had I come from, my father's Jewish, my mom is Native American. There's like 2 long lines of genocide right there. So it's if you really tap in, there's a lot of magic though, and a lot of mysticism. And so kind of looking at both with love and honesty, and knowing that you can help heal that line and keep the jewels that you get to pass on.
So magical. This has been great. I feel like we definitely could keep going.
Yeah, definitely could.
There's so much to unravel in this container, in this conversation, and really just honoring the dead and honoring our ancestors. And I think, the biggest invitation that I feel from this conversation is to just create the time to connect with them, and to even maybe speak to those who are still here in the physical, and, ask their stories, get their stories, and dive in with them, and allow for them to just share from their heart, like what, maybe some of their money stories, or maybe some of their, stories around relationships and what they think about it, because you could maybe learn something about how you're programming your thinking within what they're thinking, and I think it's just it's a powerful time. So
I've actually been, I called my maternal grandma. She didn't have much to give me. So I was like, darn. But I was like, she's the Jehovah one, but I was like, I want to know in my lineage, whether it's from my dad's side or my mom's side, was there an oracle reader? Was there, I want to know like who is like even just had an inkling of eccentricity like me, like who had that, and I don't know yet. I haven't gotten down, but I love that. Like while we do have our people here to actually talk to them and get stories to understand about yourself, and then to trust what comes through in prayer and meditation, and just trust that, just play with trusting it for the next month. And then one more piece is that you might connect to ancestry that's not of this lifetime, and to trust that as well, because there might be some really, and maybe, there's all these tests now where you can check yourself. I've wanted to do that, but
me too.
I feel a little, I'm not sure about that, but I want to, but I don't want to. But anyways, like trusting that these other ancestral connections, when you're looking at an image and you just feel this deep connection, or you go to another country and you're like, wow, I just feel at home, to trust that along with what the natural downloads that come through when you're meditating in whatever way you meditate, and then, learning about our bloodline here and just having fun with it, piecing it together, and and honoring it. And I guess this is the time. The veils are thin.
Yes, it is. Do you want to wrap this up with a card pull from the Moon Deck?
I sure do.
Yay.
All right. So I'm going to shuffle the cards. And as I shuffle, I just invite all of you to take several deep breaths into this conversation, into what's most alive for you in this conversation. Maybe setting an intention.
Arana is carefully placing all of the deck and continues to shuffle them. Okay, we have a card.
We have a card. It says, "Now is the time to integrate all that I have gathered." What? It was like either this or the ancestors card we were reading.
Yeah, I know.
So now is the time to integrate all that I have gathered. That's exactly what we're talking about. So there's
Guys, we can't make this shit up.
I know.
It's crazy.
Well, I wish we could.
Well, we did make it up to some degree. You made it.
I'll take a photo of it. Maybe we can post it somewhere.
Okay, yeah, we'll put it in the Facebook group. So if you guys are in the group, we can put it on there, and then we'll maybe in an Instagram or something when the episode is released.
Yeah, get in that group.
Yeah,
I Am Goddess podcast.
I Am Goddess Collective on there's no podcast for the Facebook group.
Great.
Yeah.
So there's a woman crouched down in like these flowers in this field, and she's holding in her hands a spiral of light that's moving upward. And she has a cloak with like a little headpiece of the moon.
She's gorgeous.
She's so pretty. And now is the time to integrate all that I have gathered. So this is really about...
It's like harvest season too.
Oh, yeah. Well, exactly. Because when I give readings and this card comes up, I use the metaphor of like, imagine you're in a beautiful garden and you have this gorgeous basket on one hip and arm, and you're holding it and you're filling it with flowers and herbs and fruits and, flowers and vegetables. And this is the time where your basket's full. So this is also the time to start before you're ready. Sure, we're always a student.
Yeah.
You can keep learning, but if you're like, you keep signing up for things because like, well, I'll get in the world with my voice when I have one more certification.
Yeah.
This is the time to stop that. You can do it again. But right now, this is the time to share your voice. But based on today's conversation, getting this card, now is the time to integrate all that I have gathered. I would also say that this is about honoring our ancestry, honoring our lineage, honoring what we've gone through thick and thin and what our story is, and letting it integrate into who we are now, letting it culminate into a place of deep reverence, understanding, strength, and resilience, so that you can be in the world and share the message, and to love all of it, and to forgive all of it, and to forgive yourself, and to really celebrate everything that got you here, from your life to your ancestry and to the lineage of this planet. Now is the time to integrate all that I have gathered, to really respect these teachings, even the hard ones. And now is the time to take the basket with all that it has and start to create with what's in the basket and share it.
Yes, beautiful. I love that. So befitting for this episode. Thank you, Arana, for coming on and blessing us with all of your wisdom and light. It has been such a joy to learn about your story and to just hear your wisdom about this whole veils that are thin. And it just feels, it feels like the chills I had from this episode already. I'm just like, you guys are probably going to feel it too. And I really hope this podcast served you. So thank you.
Thank you.
A couple more questions before we completely wrap up. I ask this to all my lovely guests that come on to wrap up the show. What does it mean to you to invoke your inner goddess?
It means to sit here with people like you and talk about it and share it. To invoke dancing is huge for me. There's been times where I didn't do it as much versus do. And that's where I'll get my most clear downloads and openings. And I just love it so much. So dance is huge for me as a goddess. Sitting with other women and having my power reflected back to me, and also being accountable with my fellow sisters and doing that for them awakens my inner goddess. And just bringing sensuality into my life outside of the sexuality side of it. Of course, that's a part of it. But the fabrics we wear, the plants and flowers we have, the scents that we bring into our life, the textures, the foods, like that is a way where I feel like I'm really in my feminine as well. And for me, this is a really big one. I think it comes more naturally to some, but just softening is like something I'm learning a lot, is softening the edges and knowing that I can be vulnerable, powerful, and beautiful all together. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
I'm still learning that one too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Arana, where can everybody find you and the Moon Deck?
Just as it sounds, our website is themoondeck.com. Our handle on Instagram, which is a place we're super active on, is _Moondeck. Facebook, The Moon Deck, 3 words. We have a great newsletter that comes out every new moon, every full moon. It's a huge download on the moons along with a ritual. And then we do a card pick of the month at the beginning of the month. That's just for our readers. And so the website is where you can get the product. It's an amazingly accessible daily tool for ritual and self-love and intuition if this is something that resonates. And I do a live free Moon Day every Monday on our Instagram and Facebook page, where I get on at 12 p.m. Pacific Coast time, pick a card, riff on these types of topics, and give you a ritual for the week. And then my personal is aaronalea.com, AARONALEA. And that's where you can find out about my oracle readings and the work that I do in the workshops. And then on Instagram, arana.lea.
Beautiful. Well, sisters, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please go check out Arana and all of her amazing work, and the Moon Deck as well. I know you're going to love it, especially if you love this conversation. All of it is like all of her wisdom. She wrote the deck and the book, and her business partner illustrated the deck. So really beautiful collaboration, and I hope you enjoy.
Yeah, and we actually have a new deck coming out in the new year, and a new intention candle thing coming out next month. So,
ooh, exciting! Yeah,
excited.
Get on board with all the medicine that's coming through for sure.
Yeah,
Yay.
And thank you, Nixie, for your medicine and your grace and just sharing this work with the world. It's so needed.
Oh, thank you. I receive that. All right, sisters, I love you. I hear you. I see you. I will see you next week. Bye for now. For those sisters who have fallen head over heels over this conversation and would love to get their hands on the Moon Deck, Arana has gifted you 10% off. So head on over to themoondeck.com and enter code GoddessMoon to get 10% off. Again, that's themoondeck.com. Enter code GoddessMoon to get 10% off.